And this is the hour we have been waiting for, the hour we have been anticipating as we get to have this conversation with Honorable Crystal Asige, nominated senator. I think we alluded earlier, not I think, but we did allude earlier to our conversation this moment, and we encourage you to actually connect with us. And I am forgetting to say that we are live on Hope TV as well. And
How
we thank
could
you
you?
so much. Thank you so much for watching us this morning from wherever you are. It's a salute to you and thank you. Remember to engage us. There's a number that appears on your screen if you're watching us on TV, and so you can link up with us over there. And if you're listening to us on radio as well, and we are live across our social media platforms at Hope FM Live, you can get to connect with us. Share the link. This information is power. Let as many people know what this act is about, where it concerns them, where they must come in, plug in, and what they need to know really that affects them both directly and indirectly. And as well, write to us on 20933. That's our SMS line at 0717 400 555 is our WhatsApp number. And of course, at Hope FM Live across our social media platforms. George, over to you.
All right, thank you. And I think without further ado, we should delve into today's conversation. And we are looking at the PWD's Act of 2025. And we are honored this morning to be hosting nominated Senator, the brainchild behind the Persons with Disabilities Act 2025. And she is a nominated senator representing persons with disabilities. She is also a top 40 under 40 winner.
Yes.
And also, she is the brainchild, of course, of this very transformative law that is the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2025. So,
and you're forgetting to mention something. She's a musician. You want to hear some vocals?
We'll see if time allows.
Yeah.
Let's see. And so, Honorable Senator, good morning.
Tobechuku, hey, Tobechuku, Tobechuku, he has done it for me.
Hey.
Ay, ay, ay. Tobechuku, Jehovah, Tobechuku, Tobechuku, he's done it for PWD.
Amen.
I tell you.
The
Beautiful voice.
I know, right? I think after this we can go to the Hope Recording Studios.
Yes.
And then we do something.
1 2 1 2
Senator,
haraka sana.
haraka upesi, you know.
Bas, it'll be a good morning for me.
BGVs, we are okay. BGVs, we are, I think, fine. And
Yes,
so
yes.
thank you so much for honoring this invitation and just coming in to share with us all about PWD's
Yes.
Act of 2025.
Thank you.
And asante sana, looking forward to an amazing time. And I think, first of all, before we even go to the Act itself, for me, I would love to start it from the point of how it feels. You know, when you heard that it had been signed into law, but before even that, you grabbed the attention of the nation. Allow me to take you back to last year when you gave that very emotional, passionate speech at the floor of the House at the height of the
Gen Z
protest,
protest,
the
yeah.
Gen Z protest and all. What led you to give such a passionate, emotional speech?
Wow. It's almost a year as well,
Yeah.
almost a year anniversary to that time. I remember it was the day before, the Tuesday, that the protests happened, the height of the protests happened, and youth and protesters were able to enter Parliament. So the Wednesday morning, we had a session. And in
Yes.
fact, I remember there was a motion that was tabled that Wednesday morning to close Parliament for us to go home on a recess and reflect on what has happened. And I was livid. I was saying, Speaker, how can we go home? We're supposed, in fact, this is the moments where we're supposed to show up as parliamentarians and not run away to our counties and hide, put our heads in the sand.
Yeah.
And so it was half frustration because of what I experienced the day before on Tuesday. All that whole day, you know, I could hear guns firing all day long, young people dancing. At one moment they're dancing and singing, the next they're screaming for their lives. It was extremely emotional. And as a young person myself, and as a person with disability, I just felt like it was important for me to be, even if I was standing alone. All the others, many others were saying, "Yeah, let's go home,"
Yeah.
Yes.
or blaming the protesters for what had happened. Casting aspersions on them. But I said, no, I'll be the only person. Even if I'm the only person and everyone hates me or I am targeted for what I'm about to say, let it be, because I am always very particular about what I say and when I say it, and I always say, God, give me the words to speak. I don't want to speak on my own behalf. Anytime I stand up in front of a microphone, I'm always waiting for God to say, this is what I want you to share with the world.
Yes.
And so that morning, that is exactly what God put in my heart to share with the world. And I had to do it. There was no otherwise for me.
All right. Okay, just at that point, how is it to balance, about the rights of youth, talking about persons with disabilities? How do you balance all these that still take care of the interests of both parties?
Yes.
And plus many more.
Well, I represent that intersectionality, don't I? Because I'm a youth, I'm a woman, and I'm a person with disability.
Yeah.
And so I live that every single day, balancing the three. And of course, I'm a musician as well, so creative rights are also in there. But it is made easier because of my own personal life experience every single day. And being able to move and weave between those different special interest groups is part of my job. And I think that is one of the reasons why, in fact, I was even given this nomination by my party leader, because I am somebody that can speak to many factions, you see. So balancing is not really the problem. It's more about having the voice heard, because we are the minority in many situations, many platforms. So having only one person or just a few opportunities to speak on these issues is they're hard to find. They're few and far between. But I continue to push.
All right. I want us to begin to delve into the assented the PWD's Act 2025. Before we do that, what does a better Kenya look like for you?
A better Kenya for me looks like one that gives space and self-efficacy to every individual, no matter their ability or disability. That should not be something that is even on the table. It should not be like, oh, you're a PWD, so this is what you're allowed and this is what is afforded to you. It should just be, you're a human being, you're a Kenyan, you're the sovereign power as per Article number 1, and therefore your rights and freedoms are intact. So that's what, for me, Kenya should look like moving forward, more diverse, more inclusive, because it is a fact that more diverse nations, more diverse societies and spaces actually foster innovation and creativity. Because if you always have men in a room or only women in a room or only PWDs in a room, then you'll only get one perspective on different issues. But if you mix it up, you can't have ugali on its own on a plate. Lazima ukule kamrenda, kanyama, so that the plate is, fulfilling. So it's the same, I believe, and I think Kenya is very much due for more inclusion and more diversity.
And we pray for that, Kenya, that we'll be able to realize the same. Let's go to the PWD's Act of 2025. But before then, just to lay a foundation, what gaps did you see in the 2003 Act that you felt we need to address this, so that now you came up with this particular bill?
Well, first of all, as you were saying in the intro beforehand, it's from 2003. And so you will note that is way before, 7 years before our constitution of 2010. And so number one, it's not aligned with the provisions of our constitution. And then number two, there is something called the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's an international document or tool that Kenya signed into, including other member states across the world. And that was from 2008. So you see the bill was 2003, and then there's 2008 that we ratified the CRPD, and then 2010 we ratified our constitution. So it is behind both of those instruments. So that is one reason I needed to align the act to different instruments that we are assigned to. Number two, there have been so many progressions
Yeah.
in technology, in international standards and principles with regard to disability since 2003. So that was like, over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There are children who have been born.
Now 20 years old.
Correct, yeah. And they need something that is that is with the times, up to the standards of 2025, basically. So that is another reason why I felt it was important to repeal the old act and then put in place this one. And then also there are things that are not included in the 2003 act, the old one. For example, it doesn't recognize people with neurodiverse disabilities. Those are the people with autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, dyslexia. They don't recognize such.
Yeah. Okay.
So I needed for those communities to also feel that, yes, they are part and parcel of our laws. So those are just some of the things that I felt were really important and are now safely and squarely in my 2025 Act.
All right. According to the census 2019, we had, the persons with disabilities making up to 2% of the population in Kenya. Those are above 5 years. Talk about these numbers, and talking about the international numbers, the global numbers, that are at 15%.
Yes.
Are we at par? Are the numbers correct?
I don't think so. And in fact, you'll be it will be difficult to find anyone in the disability community who does agree with those numbers, because in 2009 census, let's go back to that one.
Yes.
We were counted at about 1.3 million.
Okay.
1.3 million.
Correct.
Yeah.
PWDs in the country.
Yes.
And then 10 years later, 2019, like you said, we are now counted at about 900,000.
So where
So
did
we
the
went
rest go?
down. 400,000 PWDs
Missing.
have just disappeared
Wow.
in 10 years, apparently. Or maybe we have all been cured. I don't know. But I think it's because of, discrepancies in the data collection process of 2019.
Yes.
One of them being, for example, myself, I was never counted in 2019. I
Yes.
waited in my house. I waited. No one knocked on my door. So currently, I do
not
not
counted.
exist.
Yeah.
Yes. Me sitting here, I do not
Yeah.
exist according to our census. So it's things like that. Simple things like, did enumerators actually go door to door to door? Number two, were enumerators even trained properly on how to identify different disabilities? For somebody with dyslexia, that is a disability.
Yeah.
But how will you identify that if you're looking at somebody?
Yes.
That somebody has dyslexia, you see?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So, and also there's the issue of PWDs themselves internally not having accepted or not wanting to say out loud, I'm a PWD.
Yes.
So there are those intricacies that I don't think were taken into account in 2019, and that's probably why we now are down 400,000. And it doesn't make sense as well, by the way, guys, that the general population continues to rise.
Yes.
Like in PWD, CC,
they're
we continue
coming
to
down.
fall.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, where we don't have technology, medical facilities like the West, to justify that. So
Yes.
there are many issues with the numbers. And if the numbers are wrong, then we don't get proper allocation of budgets. We don't get we are not thought about properly in programming or activities or strategic thinking and interventions by the government. So we continue to suffer.
All right. Gigi, before you come in, allow me to ask, you've talked of the neurodiverse, you've talked about the dyslexia. There are people out here who don't even understand their persons with a disability, because what is a disability? Because most of us are used to, maybe you see somebody, what you can see, you can tell that so is unable to see,
The visible
unable to walk.
disabilities.
Yes. Now, how do we tell, and how many disabilities are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, according to statistics and data worldwide, there are over 300 different types of disabilities. So I don't think, first of all, that Kenyans even have a grasp of even a fraction of that. Yeah. We, like you said, we just know the ones that we see and the ones we're used to knowing or hearing of: wheelchair users, people using crutches, blind, deaf. I think from there we stop even identifying PWDs, and so we don't even think of those with multiple disabilities either. You see, those are also many in numbers. So without that education, without that sensitization, we continue to get it mixed up and not really giving proper identification or categorization to persons with disabilities. And like you say, neurodiverse disabilities is something very new.
Yes.
It's something that we've only really started thinking about in the last maybe 10, 15 years as part of law, because, you know, different countries are teaching us that there are things that we need to learn or unlearn and relearn, you see, like neurodiverse disabilities.
Yes.
We need to move away, for example, from calling them mental disorders. Some
Yeah.
people still call them mental disorders, which is not politically correct, but or even polite at all.
Yes.
But it's small things like that. I think we need a lot of more education. Ministry of Health and Education have a lot of work on their plate.
Yes.
If they are to realize the sections that belong to them in my PWD Act of 2025.
Yeah.
And it will require a concerted effort from different ministries, because each section has its owner.
Yeah.
Sections pertaining to transport, it'll be
Yes.
Ministry of Transport to figure out how to regulate and bring those to life.
Yes.
Sections pertaining to education, Ministry of Education. Sections pertaining to health, etc. in Ministry of Health. You see, so they all have a lot of work to do. It's a 64-page document, very long.
Yes.
I did a lot of work. I put a lot of thought into it, and a lot of stakeholder engagement as well was involved, because I did not want to be that kind of person or legislator that just does things on their own.
All right.
Because we know that if you move on your own, you don't move very far.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is why you are talking about mainstreaming this conversation.
Yes.
You know, I'm listening to you, Senator, and the question that comes to mind is, as a country, we have passed so many laws, so many legislations and so many reports.
Yeah.
And we have come up with all those beautiful, you know, reports and
Paperwork.
How do we translate now this challenge of policy now into practice? Because I believe that is where it all matters, where the rubber now meets the road.
Yes.
So that now this person with disability is now and feels part and parcel of this country in terms of health, in terms of transport, in terms of education, and all the benefits that are included, and you will be mentioning some of them in this act that was enacted. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think implementation has always been the bane of any piece of law that we've ever seen. You know, does it actually see the light of day in terms of do Kenyans feel it?
Yeah.
And this is no exception. I don't want to be naive to think that every single piece or part or clause that I have put together will be implemented tomorrow. No, it won't be. It requires regulation, number one. So now it's passed just a
Yes.
week ago. Today, this time last week, actually.
Yes.
It was just passed in State House, and so the next step is having all these different ministries come up with regulations. Like I say, how to have their part come alive. What is the criteria? What framework will they use to bring to life their parts of the bill of the act? Sorry, that's the first thing.
Yes.
And to do that, it will of course take time and money, because you need consultants, you need workshopping, etc., etc.
Yes.
And I would wish that part or that process is hastened by people saying, for example, I'm moving around different meetings asking for funding, like, hey, so and so, can you please help fund the creation of this regulation? Because I know that different ministries will say we have budgetary, cuts, and we're constrained with money, so we need this one will be done in 12 months. We'll wait for 12 months to look for the money and do it, but we don't have that much time. So regulations need to be put together, number one. Number two, I think the public also needs to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Share and talk about it, because that is how you will push policymakers to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
If we keep quiet, then nobody will even know that there was an act that was passed last week.
All right.
And so I would also encourage, hata kama ni, mama in chamas, people who have, I don't know, book clubs,
Yes.
such things.
Yes.
Whenever you convene a group and you know about this bill, about this act, just talk about it, read through the bills. I'm always posting on my social media about different highlights and key provisions.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be a joint effort. So let government do their part, but then also let us as the general public do our part in talking about it.
Yeah. And I like what you're doing very aggressively,
Yeah.
going all out in ensuring that the country is informed, educated of what has actually happened. But as you said, it's a concerted effort.
Yeah.
You can't really be everywhere.
Correct.
Every day.
Yes.
So you need help, you need assistance. And with that, because the media plays a role,
Yeah.
the education, because there are persons with disabilities in these learning institutions as
Yeah.
well. The same need is also, or rather, is shared even at that level.
Yes.
Senator, would you highlight for us, if now we can get into the PWD's Act of 2025?
I think before we do that,
Yeah.
there's the bit of the part of the 2003 before we just so that we can have
Yes.
a contrast. How was it in terms of inclusivity, maybe in the employment sector, public service, for the previous act? This is the 2003.
So in the previous act, it also said that there should be allocation of 5% minimum
Yes.
employment for persons with disabilities in both appointive and elective positions across the country. That's public sector and private sector. So not just PSC
Yes.
to stick to or get to that 5% employment of PWDs, but also, the blue chip companies all the way down to like the small startups, if possible, 5% allocation for PWDs. That has not been attained by anyone across the country.
Okay.
In the reports that I have been collecting over years, the highest that we have come to is about 1.8. That is
1.8.
PSC, with the Public Service Commission only having about 1.8 PWDs employed with them. And then, of course, in private sector, Safaricom is teetering at around the same number, 1.8 to 2%. So we are still, since the 2003 Act, 20-something years ago, but hatujafika 5%. So there's a lot of work to do, but it's still included in mine as well.
All right.
So that, because we need to be optimistic.
Yes,
We
yes.
cannot. I don't write laws so that to be limiting with the laws that I write, or
Yes, yeah.
the ideology or the ideal. Sorry, that I see Kenya going towards. We need to also push for these things rather than taking them down. People were saying, why don't we just bring it down to 2%? Because is it realistic? But I said no.
Yes.
How will we push ourselves to reach somewhere if we're sort of like moving slowly and encouraging us to slow down? So that has not been attained, unfortunately, and
All right.
many PWDs because of that are lacking employment and therefore continue to swim in that cycle of poverty.
All right. Okay. I think we need to have maybe the highlights.
Yeah.
Of now the 2025 PWDs Act. Yeah, maybe if you could just take us through what it entails.
Yes. So let me start with some incentives, because I believe that it's good to have punitive or to warn people, if you don't do this, this will happen.
Yeah.
It's
But
good.
actions, yeah.
Yeah. But also I think that people respond to incentives as well. So I was very keen on putting in incentives. For example, 25% deduction from taxable income for employers who hire persons with disabilities. So they'll
Yes.
have 25% off if you hire more. The more you hire, 25% will be afforded to you.
All right.
And also for employers, if you make adjustments to your building or your workspace, for example, you put a disabled washroom in your office or the building, or you put disabled parking slots and ramps and lifts that have auditory prompts and the
Yes.
braille, whatever adjustments you do to accommodate PWDs, you can get up to 50% as well.
All right.
Incentive from income, right? So those are for costs related to doing that retrofitting. Also, counties must reserve 5% of the public service jobs to persons with disabilities, like we just were talking about.
Okay.
I also have put a minimum of 5% of market stalls should be reserved for entrepreneurs with disabilities.
Okay.
So important. Our
Yes.
toys, our Adams, etc.
yes.
Also, not just in
Gikomba.
Nairobi, Gikomba,
Yes.
everywhere in Mombasa, all the way down
Every
to
county.
every county.
Yeah.
I've now said that 5%. And you remember, there's there are these industrial parks that are being created.
Yes, yes.
Yes, even those ones will have to have at least 5% allocated or reserved for PWDs who
Okay.
are entrepreneurs, so that we can continue doing our small businesses. But like, to be heckled out here by
Yes.
Kanjo all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I have raised the retirement age for PWD to 65
Mm-hmm.
because, as you know, many of us, we do not actually get to attain education.
Yes.
You'll find that there's a PWD who is 20 years old in class 4, for example, you see,
Yeah.
because of the barriers that we've been talking about so far.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important, and what I've attained from the different public participations that I did was that, hey, we need a bit more time to work because it's so hard for us to actually get
Started
into
late.
it.
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
So, and I'm also included in that. I didn't start working until somebody believed in me when I was well into my 20s. So there's that. I think that's very important. And also very important that people have really been praising or looking forward to is lifetime tax exemption certificate for persons with permanent disabilities.
Okay.
So far, since the 2003 Act,
Yes.
every 5 years you have to be reassessed and given a new certificate if you have a disability. And people were saying, Sisa, now, if me as a wheelchair user, I'm paraplegic, for example.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been that way since I was 14 years old. I'm now 45. Every 5 years, you have to tell me to get reassessed, and that process is very long
Yeah.
and arduous. It can take between 3 and up to 6 or even more months than that. So now I am saying in the Act that if you are deemed to have a permanent disability, you just have to do that one time, and that'll be it. Your certificate will be valid for life. So that's really important. It takes a huge burden off people with disabilities.
Or maybe just at that point before we proceed,
Yeah.
talk about the process of assessment before somebody, is given the certificate. How long is it? How tedious? Or, is it easy?
Well, most people say that it's not easy. Of course, you're a PWD, so moving around, mobility, looking for for those few monies to do the assessment, it's been a challenge. But the process generally is that you need to go to any level 3, 4, 5 hospital. You find the closest one to you in your county, your ward, your sub county.
Yes.
And then you take with you your a letter from the doctor saying that yes, this person, Crystal Asige, is visually impaired. She has glaucoma. These are the reports to prove that this is the condition that she has. Take that to the level 3, 4, or 5 hospital, and then they will do for you a medical assessment within the hospital. Different hospitals charge different things. I want to make that clear. Across the country, medical facilities have their own costs.
Yes.
Some do it for free. Like, for example, Mama Lucy, I know, do it for free. But there are some who do it for 600 shillings, 500 shillings. I myself, when I was in Mombasa doing mine many years ago, I paid about 1,000 shillings in Shuda.
Yes.
That's where I did my assessment. So it will depend and vary depending on where you are. But it should definitely not go above 1,500.
Okay.
And if it does, call me and tell me about that so that
Yes.
I can also question these hospitals. Why would you make the charges so high?
Maybe
So
how
after,
long does it take?
so after that, it takes about 3 months. That's what they say, or that's what it is on paper.
Yes.
Yes, but there are those who complain it's taken longer.
Yeah.
And then after that medical assessment report has come out within those 3 months that they say, it is taken to the director of I forget the health services, I think here in Nairobi,
Yes.
to counter check it, to approve it.
Yeah.
And then after that approval happens in Nairobi, then you can take that approval together with all the other documentation that you have been moving around with, now to National Council for Persons with Disabilities. It's on Wayaki Way here in Nairobi.
Right.
And you take all those documentation to them, and then now they will give you and process to give you a disability certificate.
That's the
so that you're
Director of
registered.
Medical Services, huh?
Thank you, Director of
DMS.
Medical Services.
Particular process. Then after now we get the certification and all, what are some of the other, should I say, incentives that are included in the bill, in the act now?
Yes. So now there will also be, if you have a certification and you've been approved and registered, there is also a provision in the Act for parents or caregivers to get exemptions from their income tax if they are a parent or a guardian of a PWD with a severe disability who are incapable of catering for themselves daily, for their basic needs daily. So this is something that parents have really been crying for a long time.
Okay.
You will know that, for example, if you have a child with a severe disability, which renders them, sort of needing 24/7 care,
Yes.
that basically means that the parent or the guardian has to give up their lives to take care of this person, right?
Yeah.
And many parents have lost their jobs because employers are like, you're ever asking for leave days, you're ever asking for time to take your child to physiotherapy, to the hospital. So many parents have actually lost their jobs because of frustration from employers. And therefore, what is their alternative? Either they go to work, make money to take care of their child,
Yes.
or they stay at home and make no money and continue to suffer. So this one was particularly for those types of parents who have to take care or give 24/7 care to a child or a person, a loved one with a disability. And I'm hoping that once this has regulations in place to support it, it will really, really go a long way. Because I've had parents who say in a week, for example, taking a child to physiotherapy will cost them 4,000 shillings per week.
Per week.
Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
for 1 hour sessions, 4 times a week, for
Yes.
example.
Yeah.
The medication that is entailed, the transport, because you have to get a bigger car or a bigger cab, or pay times 2 in a matatu, things like that. So it's very costly, and I'm hoping that this provision will at least give a bit of relief to these parents and caregivers who really work so hard to raise us PWDs. And then there's also tax incentives for donors, supporters, and insurers who are covering PWDs. So, for example, if you're an insurer, the Jubilees, the ones we know
Yes.
and are aware of in the country, creating products specifically geared to PWDs or institutions that take care of PWDs or schools, special schools, for example. If you actually create products like that as an insurer, then you are able to get a few tax incentives as well afforded to you. So this is, again, just to encourage people to, look at disability as something that they can be a part of, creating solutions for.
Yes.
It was really important for me to do. And also infrastructure and physical accessibility, huge issue.
Yes.
Because if I cannot move, I cannot enjoy life
Very
at all.
true,
I cannot
yeah.
access education, anything, all the things that we're talking about.
Yes.
So our buildings and streets really need to adhere to universal design standards, which is now in the Act. It's required in all constructions and transport systems in the country now. And NCPWD are the ones to register accessibility auditors who will now inspect
Yes.
buildings and streets to make sure that, and transport as well, to make sure that they are compliant with universal design standards. If you don't have a ramp, National Council can now come and sanction you and tell you, hey, you have to comply. Look at this PWD Act. It says 1, 2, 3. We're giving you 6 months to comply. And if that building does not comply, then they are subject to punitive actions. You can get a fine of up to 5 million.
Okay.
Or 5 years in jail, or both, if you continue to, abscond your duties as a building owner, for example.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's let me also go to Section 75 that talks about registered vehicles as well. So matatus, I also didn't forget about our matatus.
Yes.
If
they
they
play a big role.
Yes,
Yeah?
they do in transport and moving the country around. So if they create, for example, a special seat designated for PWDs,
Yes.
or modify their car in any way, their vehicle in any way, manyangas, matatus, etc., then they are also eligible for tax incentives and reliefs.
All right.
So this is just to encourage our PSVs, just please, to bebe. Don't
Yeah.
forget, don't leave us. Many times you see a PWD at the stage, wachana
Yes.
na yeye, he has a wheelchair,
Yeah.
they have to do what wachana na yeye. That's money that is being lost. But now I'm saying we're incentivizing you to at least make those adjustments to your vehicles.
All right. Talk about the provision from the Act to matters education, because we've had schools for persons living with disabilities that are separate in their own school, and then we have a school that is for people who are abled. They're fully abled. Talk about this difference, because in the Act, are you talking about now having the persons with disabilities mixed together with somebody who's normal?
Yes. So we're talking about traditional schools versus special schools.
Yes.
Yes. So the international standards, see, I told you that we're now in 2025. This Act, for me, I had to bring it up to speed with what's happening across the world, so that at least we have an aim, we have a goal to aim for.
Yes.
And internationally, nowadays we are calling it inclusive education. So not, like you say, separating, those who are blind, you go over there.
Yeah.
Those who are deaf, you go over there. We now want to see a world and communities where we are integrating and we're becoming more inclusive. So it means that us in this room, we will go and go to a school together.
Yeah.
So that you can learn, I used to go to school with Crystal, a girl called Crystal, she was visually impaired.
Yes.
But I know how to now take care of a visually impaired person. I know how to walk with her. I know how to support her, It becomes normal, you see, so that when we grow up, it's not something that we are now facing still discrimination, stigmatization, things like this. So inclusive education is really important to have all people who are different and diverse in one classroom.
Yes.
And yes, the people with disabilities in inclusive education will need a bit more support, a support teacher, for example. So we are also calling for TSC training to include at the most basic level, just
Yes.
a bit of special education as well.
Okay.
So that every teacher, whether you go and teach geography in the end or whether you go and specialize in physics, at least you have that basic knowledge in how to teach special
Yes.
education. So that, like I say, because education usually is a mirror to what you're going to go and see in the world, isn't it? You'll never go to a place where you only find blind people.
Yeah.
So why should you stick in a blind school from class 1 all the way to when you finish your high school education? So that's very important to me. And also, there's another bill that I'm working on. It's called the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, still in circulation in Parliament. And that has a provision that says we should also have a KICD create a curriculum for sign language.
All right.
So that even kids in class 1, class 2 who learn basic sign language again, so you can grow up at least knowing how to speak English, Swahili, and kidogo sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Allow me to take you back to this issue of the exemption of taxes for them, especially that are taking care of a severely, disabled person. How I know you said the regulations are still being crafted and all, but then again, who stands to benefit from this? Could it be, the reason I'm asking this, could it be also a sibling? Could it be the nitty-gritty?
Any caregiver.
Yeah. So the spirit behind this, let me explain it so that people know exactly what I was thinking of when putting this one together, is that there are people with disabilities which render them sort of dependent on another person for life,
Yes.
right? And therefore, if you're dependent on another person, let's take a paraplegic person again, somebody who is paralyzed maybe from the neck downwards, and really needs support to do everything from eating to showering to going outside to catch a bit of sun,
Yes.
things like that. Those are the kind of people who would have essentially been able to get tax benefits because as a PWD, you're able to get tax exemption, right? Already. They would have been able, if they were able to seek employment, get and benefit from tax exemption. But because their condition renders them incapable of even seeking employment, I asked myself, so what about the person who's taking care of the other person? Like I say, they have to give up their lives.
Yes.
So why not transfer that benefit from the person with a severe disability who cannot look for a job ever in life because of their condition?
Yes.
Transfer that benefit from them to the person who is taking care of that person 24/7, so that at least they benefit from tax exemption. And again, like I say, parents are really struggling with all the costs that come in play with taking care of a PWD who is needing 24/7 care. And so what would that look like? Like you say, regulations. But for me, there's a categorization guideline that the Ministry of Health actually already has.
Okay.
So it categorizes things like severe disabilities, mild disabilities, so on and so forth. That's actually online.
Okay.
And I can always share the link on my social media handles if anyone requires it.
Yeah.
So that the Ministry of Health will use that, I guess, together when they put the regulations together, and use that to then ascertain or at least be part of the criteria for the relevant minister to when they look at these applications for tax exemptions for the caregiver. A caregiver will go to Minister for Finance and say, hey, I'm a caregiver, I'm a legal, not just somebody who nilimpata tu huyu and they're now in my house.
Yes.
Because Kenyans are clever.
Yeah.
They can see this
Very
act.
creative.
They can see this act and then
Yeah.
just say, let me go to
It's an opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to be legally registered as a parent or a caregiver to this PWD, and then you will go to the relevant CS, make an application, and they will have criteria according to the regulations that they will, like you say, craft,
Yes.
which will assess, okay, this PWD that you're taking care of 24/7, how severe is the disability? Does it render them unable to take care of themselves or seek employment?
Yeah.
And then from there, they will determine how much of a tax exemption you will get and the threshold that you can benefit from.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Crystal. It's interesting that you talked about these people that are, you gave an example of someone who's paralyzed from the neck downward. And we have a listener who's written in this morning and they say, does such a person need to get their national ID, or does the PWD ID suffice? They say this person has never walked. They're taking care of a boy who's now 18. He's never walked. He's been bedridden. And the question is, should they access a national ID?
So in order to get your disability certificate, you already have to have an ID, because I told you the process, right?
Yes.
You go to the hospital, get your assessment, then you take all those documentation to National Council for PWDs. And in order to get your disability certificate, you also have to produce a national ID so that we know that you're Kenyan, because also, there are many people who cross the borders.
Yeah.
Yes, because Kenya is really, compared to our counterparts in the continent, we're a bit ahead in different legislation. So you have to prove that you're a Kenyan, you have to have your disability certificate from National Council, and then now you are able to apply for the benefits that are in this law.
All right, great.
Yeah.
So it starts with the national ID and then to the certificate. All right, a very important topic you have. This one says, I have an auntie whose kid is 22 years old and with disabilities, and adult diapers are very expensive. Could there be a clause or a provision on tax exemption on adult diapers?
Off the top of my head, there is not something specific to adult diapers in my law, because the thing is, we cannot get prescriptive in a law.
Yeah.
That's one thing that is usually told to us as part of standards and principles of writing law. So that is not exclusive or expressly in my law about diapers. However, I do know many organizations that do support in such with such products to support people with disabilities, and I would encourage our listener to try and look for those information or those numbers from the National Council for persons with disabilities.
Okay.
All right. And I guess probably that would be the same for this one, Senator, who says, I'm loving the conversation, and God bless you, Senator. My question is, does the government offer free Epilim medication? They say their son has suffered for a very long time due to convulsions disorder. And the medication is quite expensive for them to get. What do you make of that, Senator?
I may not be able to speak to that because I'm not in the Ministry of Health, and so I don't have that information with me. I would encourage maybe that listener to get in touch with us on my social media, and if he or she identifies themselves, then I can try to and get the data that they require from Ministry of Health.
All right.
All right.
They speak of, they say this, and maybe you could give us a comment on that, on the issue of stigma and discrimination, because they say their son was rejected from a high school due to his state, and he was quite... and she says this has left them hurting for a long while. The son convulses every now and then, and that bothers other students. That's the reason they were given.
Yes, I think, funnily enough, the 2003 Act does not have provisions, the old one now, did not have provisions for discrimination.
Okay.
So now with mine, with this new law that I've been able to put in place, it is a rights-based approach. It is recognizing that disability rights are human rights. You cannot discriminate against me to enter a supermarket or to access a hospital or to go into classrooms because of my disability. So now with this law in place, that person or that case, and I've had many of these cases. In fact, recently I was dealing with a young lady from Bungoma County who was told she cannot do her KCSE exams because of her condition, and she was locked out of school. And so those kinds of situations where there is proof, you can absolutely take that institution or that school to court, and they be tried under the law.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
You keep mentioning the National Council of Persons with Disabilities, because they will play and they ought to play such a big role in this. How strong are they? And especially at the grassroots level. And the reason why I'm asking this is because of the issue of stigmatization. And so you find at the grassroots level, they are hiding these people, they are hiding their children, they don't want them to come out. And so if the council has serious footprints at the grassroots, it means they can even be able to visit their homes and have these people registered.
Yeah.
How crucial are they?
Very crucial. Unfortunately, though, the National Council do not have much budget. Like I said, remember I told you about data?
Yes, yes.
Because we're so few,
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
have much money that comes to us. That's the case for National Council. In fact, in this year's finance bill, I've had a look and I see that National Council, though last year and the previous years they were given a budget of about 259 million, this year the proposal is that it gets cut down to 159, even though they had actually requested for an increase,
Yeah.
but instead they're getting a decrease.
All right.
And so it's really difficult for them to, roll out their programs, activities, especially in the counties. Those Wajirs and Kwales,
Yeah.
very
Yes.
far-flung places. Unfortunately, they only have one officer. Can you imagine per
One.
All right.
county? There's only one PWD officer in each
Running an
county.
entire county.
Running an entire county, yeah.
that's
Which means that
serious.
they have to, like you say, go and how do they look for these people who are hidden inside homes,
Yes.
deep in rural areas especially. I propose, and this is something that I am lobbying for with the Ministry of Health, together with Ministry of Immigration and other cabinet ministers. We need CHPs to be trained on disability matters.
Yes.
Because they're the ones who are really on the ground. We need local chiefs as well to be educated on matters of disability, how to identify, how to sensitize a household on on the ways to take care of this PWD instead of locking them away.
Yes.
So it needs way more people on the ground. It
Yeah.
cannot just be that one NCPWD
Yes.
officer in the county, because budgets are not friendly, unfortunately. When it comes time to cut budgets,
Yeah.
disability is always number one. It's
Okay.
very sad.
All right. Okay. We have a good number of PWDs in the streets. It's purported, alleged that they're being used for, as a commercial, for commercial purposes, to beg out here. Do we have a provision in the Act speaking to this?
Yes, and let's not say it's purported or alleged. It's happening.
Okay.
Let's just be frank and say it, because we know, we see
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It is absolutely happening, and from my county, Mombasa especially, it is very prevalent.
Okay.
You just see people being dropped off at 7 a.m. On some corner in Mombasa, or even in here in Nairobi. I've experienced the same, and their job is to beg.
Yes.
They're dropped off in a matatu,
Yeah.
like 10 of them. They beg, especially children, because they apparently they gain more money
Yes.
than older people with
Yeah.
disabilities. And then at 6 p.m. they're picked up and they go and give their earnings to whoever. So now that is absolutely a crime in my law. It
Yes.
never used to be, funnily enough, and it was never recognized as something that needs punitive action to be afforded to it. So now I have said that anyone who is found using people with disabilities or children with disabilities for begging or for receiving alms, it's called legal. That's a legal language. Receiving alms is also can also face the law by a 2 million shilling fine, 2 years in prison, or to both if convicted.
Okay. All right.
Right. Someone is asking actually how they can get, how can we contact Crystal in regards to the PWDs Act?
Oh, fantastic. I'm all over social media. I try to be as active as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm on all socials. You can always DM me, and I look. By the way, speaking of social, this morning there is a follower of mine.
Yes.
His name is Say No to GOK Oppression. Alisema niwasalimie.
All right.
They said that you guys are awesome, and I should make sure that I shout
you.
to you
All
out.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, social media, as you can see, I'm always on it. I'm always looking at comments and DMs, so they can find me on social. And my office is also open. I'm in Parliament. If you call Parliament buildings and seek for my office to have a sit down with you, then we can absolutely do that.
All right. Okay. Now, what's your clarion call to the government, to social groups and the church, many people out here, the general public, towards the bill, the act?
Well, my clarion call is for once and for all, let us prioritize disability matters. Because honestly, if you look at any data, any statistics, any studies across the world, you will see that they say, once you make an environment friendly to a person with disability, once you make an environment safe for a person with disability, once you make an environment equitable or affordable, you make it all of those things for every single other person. Can you imagine, basically, if I could move from here to my office, to home, to the supermarket without needing anyone's help? That means that a child can do it, the elderly can do it, people who don't speak the local language can do it, because PWDs are like a very good benchmark. If you make it good for us, it's automatically good for everyone. So my call would be for government to see disability as a way to make our country more sustainable, more inclusive, by prioritizing it. And I would also say to the general public, support this act, in even if you can't do anything physically about it, just share it, talk about it. Like I say, share it online. If you see my posts floating around on your timeline, just hit share or send it to a person that you know would benefit from the information I'm trying to give out. And I would also say to PWDs themselves, let us take ownership of this act. I have done my part. I've spent 2.5 arduous years putting it together. As a first-time nominated senator, somebody who's never been a politician. I'm not from dynasty. Mimi sina pesa. You know, I didn't come from a long line of politicians. I have really put my heart and soul into this act. And I think that it's now for me to pass on the baton to Council of Governors, pass the baton to general public, local chiefs, churches, schools, Gen Z, those who support me, so that we can get it as far and as wide as possible.
Great.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank
Really appreciate your time and even the hard work that you have done put in to ensure that now the bill is now an act, and really appreciate you for the same, and for the good work. May God renew you, and may He refresh you.
Amen.
Even as you continue to traverse the whole nation to ensure that the same is now being implemented. Sharon.
Absolutely. We have way too many comments for the time that we have, and so probably we should consider having, many actually are saying you should consider having Senator Crystal come back, and many are actually applauding the great work that Senator Crystal has done. And so once again, from all of us, it's a big thank you to you, Senator, for the great work. Keep on keeping on.
Shukran.
We're waiting for many more from you, because we've seen you do it. Keep on keeping on. And that's it. Gentlemen.
Yes.
Frank
Lady.
and George, this is it. This is your cue to say goodbye.
All right.
Aya.
George Gishuru, nikwambie kwa heri.
Usiseme tu, ambia msikilizaji kwa heri. But anyway, thank you so very much. It's been really enjoyed myself as well. Thank you, Activate team, for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you so
really
much.
Appreciate.
Hope at Dawn. Hope TV for hosting us. God bless you.
God bless you. See you tomorrow, same time and same place. Bye-bye.
FM.